Hey guys, it's Chris here again from R&D Offroad. As you may be aware, we've started a video series on some of the Victron electric accessories for four-wheel drives. I just thought before we continue with the series, I'd take a step back and just run through the absolute basics of dual battery systems. So you've gone out, you've bought a four-wheel drive. You've then seen a special offer for a fridge and you realize you're going to be spending a bit of time camping, so you go out and you buy a fridge, which then needs powering. You can't run the fridge off the main battery, because needless to say, if you leave the fridge on, the main battery is going to be drained down too low, and there's going to be a point in the weekend where you cannot start your motor vehicle. So what we then need to do is we need to add on a second battery, the auxiliary battery, onto the motor vehicle itself to run the fridge, auxiliary lighting, and possibly a water pump as you start growing your accessories. So before you go off and start doing homework as to exactly how this all works, here's a very short breakdown of why and what one needs when having an auxiliary battery system fitted to your motor vehicle. So at this point, we have a camping fridge, we have a crank battery, and the crank battery in the motor car is your starter battery, which is charged by your alternator. So we have a certain amount of input going on this side, and on this side of the board we have output. Your first item being your camping fridge. Sooner or later you're bound to get some auxiliary lighting and maybe a water pump. All of these items need power, and as I've mentioned earlier, cannot be powered by the cranking battery because you're definitely going to get yourself into trouble there. So we need to add an auxiliary battery to the system. When you go out shopping for your deep cycle auxiliary battery, you'll notice that there are a myriad of different options on the market. And I'm not going to go into all the details right now of the different batteries. They range from AGM, gel, lithium are the latest craze, which are phenomenal. The bottom line is depending on your budget and your application, sit down with somebody who has a good idea of what is available and discuss it in detail before you go out spending the money on the item. We need just a brief understanding of the difference between a crank battery and the auxiliary battery. And I heard quite a nice analogy this week. A gentleman was calling the crank battery a sprinter. It's designed for power to be drawn from it very quickly, and your alternator is then designed by the motor manufacturers to put power back into it very quickly. And that is the basis of that system. A deep cycle battery is more like a marathon runner, where it needs to last a long time. So the battery is designed to discharge over a long period of time, but then in turn, when it gets recharged, it's a lot longer, slower process to get the battery back up to 100%. And this is where most basic battery systems fall short, because modern day alternators, and even slightly older alternators, are not able to charge both the crank battery and the auxiliary battery back up to 100%. So in the middle, we've got our protect and charge buddies, and they're essentially sitting, as you can see, between the crank battery and the auxiliary battery. And the options we've got on this side, the first option, which is a very old style option, is a manual switch, and it's a simple on-off switch which stops the current from flowing from the alternator to the auxiliary battery, and when you flip the switch again, it'll let the power through. So when you get to campsite, you'd switch the switch off. Your auxiliaries would then drain your deep cycle battery. Once you start your car again, you switch the switch on, and that'll allow the power to flow through to your auxiliary battery and recharge it as best the alternator could. Needless to say, with the manual switch, again you have the risk of forgetting to engage the switch, and you in turn have a very flat auxiliary battery. Along came the solenoid. The solenoid eliminated having to worry about engaging and disengaging the switch. The minute you start the car, we have a wire off the solenoid connected to the ignition. The ignition activates the solenoid, which immediately connects the two batteries, and the alternator then charges both. When you turn the ignition off, it disconnects the solenoid, breaking the link between the two and keeping the auxiliary side safe from the crank battery side. This system was later upgraded a bit. You were able to get a timed solenoid, which came on a few minutes later after you turned on the ignition, allowing the crank battery to get some power before the alternator needed to feed both. And at the same time, they were also bringing out items called heavy-duty relays, which is a very similar system, but it's a sealed unit and an electronic-based unit. All three of these units, as I explained earlier, you had an alternator designed to charge a crank battery. The same alternator was now trying to charge a deep cycle and a crank battery at the same time. Not as efficient as we'd want it to be, needless to say. So, the last couple of years, the best thing since sliced bread has hit the market, and that is the DC to DC charger. Well, I hope that little chat about auxiliary battery systems has helped. And yes, the DC to DC charger, the cat's in the bag, is not being released in this episode. See you guys later.